Very much indeed. An African Renaissance. You may perhaps recall the expression used by the then President of the United States, Bill Clinton, to describe the future he hoped for that continent. It was 15 years ago that he set off on the longest visit ever undertaken by a serving president. His interest in Africa outlasted his presidency, and the Clinton Foundation has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for numerous projects across the continent. He's just been back there, and Komla Dumor of the BBC World News joined him to see if the Renaissance ever happened.
It's been more than 10 years since he left office, but his engagement in global affairs shows no sign of abating. After leaving the White House, he established the Clinton Global Initiative. He's raising hundreds of millions of dollars from private donors and corporations to fight HIV and AIDS, stamp out malaria, and provide healthcare solutions in poor communities across the world, especially in Africa. But what role does philanthropy play on a continent that is becoming more economically assertive and is building new relationships outside America's influence? At this event in Tanzania, President Clinton observed a demonstration on how a microfinance project helps local businesswomen. It's backed by an international NGO and Barclays Bank. On paper, it works well. Women get small loans, they start a business, they feed their families. For all involved, it looks like a win-win situation, and frankly, it's great PR. It's through initiatives like this that Bill Clinton thinks aid can be most effective.
I can perfect a solution to a problem and then throw it into high relief and hope other people will embrace it, including governments. Or I can go out and do what I try to do through the Global Initiative, which is get other partners, and together we have a huge collective impact.
But is this the best model for African development? The continent has made enormous progress in recent years. GDP growth in places like Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Ghana has outstripped all of Europe's lethargic economies. An hour outside the capital, in the town of Bagamoyo, work is set to start that'll transform these pristine beaches into one of the biggest ports Africa has ever seen. It's funded by $10 billion from China.
We have beautiful shores. We lose the beauty of the place itself and the people who are living here. But in another side, if you take on the aspect of the economic, we need to have this port. We need, because it's going to boost the economy of the country.
What is happening here is being replicated across the continent. China has overtaken America as Africa's biggest trading partner. Clinton concedes that in almost every area of engagement, America is playing catch-up.
I don't believe that we spend enough money on basic infrastructure in our aid program. I don't believe we spend enough money on basic economic growth initiatives. So I won't argue that the Chinese are going to get a lot of goodwill. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for America if African countries appreciate both what we try to do to help their kids stay alive and what the Chinese do to give them better infrastructure. And I think that we've got to try to create a future that we can share with the Chinese, not one where everything is a zero-sum game.
That does sound very optimistic, but you know what real politics is, and how likely is that? The competition
it's more likely than you think. Look at all the places where, no matter how grateful people were to China for their investment, if they think they came in and employed too many Chinese workers and too few local workers, if they think that the working people weren't treated well, if they think that the effect of the infrastructure investment was to prop up a government that didn't have broad popular support, there are downsides to that too. In the end, countries have to make their own future. If when we invest with a country, we're careful not to ask for too much, careful not to act like we're trying to shape too much.
Tie it to human rights?
No, I don't mean it like that. No, I think it's a good thing we stand up for human rights. What have we learned from all these experiments since the Arab Spring? Politics is a lot more than majority rule. It's minority rights, individual rights, human rights, shared decision making. And so I think that we need to help other countries and empower people around the world because it's the right thing to do.
There are many who feel that China has advanced its interests in Africa partly because it is willing to ignore issues of transparency and human rights. Rwanda is our next destination, and it is there the Clinton record demands the most scrutiny. Bill Clinton was the most powerful man in the world. There was no intervention from America or anyone else. Over 1 million people were slaughtered.
Is it that sense of, responsibility? At the time it happened, you were president, that connects you or actually drives the position that you have vis-a-vis this issue?
Maybe.
Guilt?
No,
Perhaps
not guilt, because whatever guilt I had went away when I took responsibility for not helping them. I remember in 2001 when I went back to Rwanda for the second time, a reporter was riding in the streets of Kigali with a taxi driver, and he said, "Aren't you mad that Bill Clinton's here working on AIDS and all this stuff? Because he didn't help you." He said, "No, I'm not." And the reporter said, "Why?" And he said, "First, he didn't make us kill each other. We were all adults and we did it. And we've got to stop blaming outsiders for what we did to ourselves." That's Kagame's contribution. And then he said, secondly, at least he said, "I'm sorry, nobody else has apologized."
Today, Rwanda is one of the biggest recipients of Western aid and support from the Clinton Foundation. But progress has been blighted by accusations of human rights abuses, both domestically and abroad.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can kindly welcome His Excellency the President.
President Kagame's government has been accused of funding rebel movements in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Rwanda has consistently denied any involvement across the border. It also has its defenders, among them former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and Bill Clinton.
I support a free press in Rwanda. I don't support the repression of journalists. I don't think human rights should be violated in the Congo to protect the territorial integrity of Rwanda. But I suppose I do make more allowances for a government that has produced as much progress as that one has, and has been well organized and otherwise had the rule of law. And so it's the way it is. There's very few situations are perfect.
As the foundation expands its footprint and influence in Africa, another Clinton is taking up a bigger role.
Did I do okay? That was okay? Thank you. Just, vigorously, Dad. Vigorously.
Chelsea Clinton sits on the foundation's board, and at this project, backed by World Vision and Procter & Gamble in Rwanda, demonstrates how simple interventions can provide clean water in poor communities.
I think the metric of success in your life really matters. And as much as I loved solving a problem and kind of when I worked on Wall Street, kind of seeing that I was right in an investment idea, I didn't ultimately want to denominate my life in dollars. I wanted to dominate my life in the number of lives that I could help save or help become healthier, or the number of people that I could help empowered to lead their own lives.
And you come from a very, influential political dynasty, some would say. Why make not that choice as opposed to pursuing this?
Right now, I very much feel called to participate in the nonprofit sector. I also am grateful to live in a city and a state and a country where I really believe in my elected representatives. If ever one of those changed and I thought I could make more of a difference in a public sector capacity, or if I no longer lived in a city and a state and a country where I really believed in both kind of the ethics and the competencies of my political leaders, then I'd have to ask myself honestly whether or not that would be a better path.
But the politics has already changed. Whereas the Clintons are out to win hearts and minds across Africa, the United States has already opened up a new and more dangerous phase of engagement with the continent. Africa is now one of the major fronts in the battle against international terrorism.
We're obviously in a very unstable period in the world, particularly on the continent. Many of the experts I've spoken to link this directly to what happened in Libya and the overthrow of Gaddafi. I've heard experts say that Libya has now become the primary source of funding and for arms for Al-Qaeda. Was it a mistake to overthrow Gaddafi in that manner?
Yeah, he was overthrown in no small measure by a popular uprising that the other countries supported.
Gave them guns, gave rebels arms.
Yes, but was it a mistake to help them overthrow him without knowing exactly what the outcome would be? I don't think so. And let's not forget, Gaddafi was no saint. He did one or two things that he had no business doing too.
But isn't the consequence the instability we're seeing now in Algeria, in northern Mali, in northern Nigeria? The arms are flowing from Libya into those places.
Yes, but there are a lot of guns there that could be used, not just in Libya and other places. I think here's the flip side. You asked me about human rights in Rwanda. There's no question that President Kagame can win a popular election with an overwhelming vote. Then we say we should have let a proven human rights abuser and a man who blew up an airplane with a lot of innocent kids on it stay as the ruler of Libya because we can't stand the chaos if he's gone. It's a messy world we live in. There are no guarantees. If he thinks he's going to win.
And in Syria, what should America do?
What I think we are finally getting around to doing, which is provide arms and other support, do it through the channel that we believe is by far the most trustworthy, General Idris, and hope for the best. The Syrians have not asked us to put boots on the ground, nor should they, nor should we. And it may work or it may not, but I think, and there is no good choice there, but if Iran and Russia have made a choice and they have unleashed Hezbollah forces to fight, and that is what seems to have turned the tide a little bit here, this is one of those things where it's better to get caught trying, win or lose. Sometimes you're not going to win them all.
Doing something is better than doing nothing at all.
Sometimes. Not always, but in this case, I think, yes. I think when this is said and done, if we can ask ourselves, how will we feel if Assad is replaced? How will we feel if he prevails? I think in both cases, given the facts on the ground and what has occurred, the United States will feel better if we tried to create a constructive alternative. That is potentially...
In Africa, there are challenges that remain, which he feels need to be confronted.
We have to feed 7 billion people in the world today. We're going to have to feed 9 billion by 2050. We have all these global warming, climate change problems, and we have an enormous number of people who live in countries that have lots of money but can't feed themselves, and their instinct is to say, we should mechanize agriculture in poor African countries and throw smallholder farmers off the land. If the population of the world continues to go up, people will take more things out of the ground. The problem is there's been too much corruption in who got to do it, what was done with the revenues. And I'm only too happy to try to clean that up. I go and give a speech about this in Nigeria every year to the people who are doing it a lot of times. But people are still going to take that stuff out of the ground. So what we need to do is to set up systems that work better to do that. I would happily spend a lot of the rest of my life doing that because I think it's a huge threat if it's done wrong and a huge opportunity if it's done right. But this farming thing, I can have a real impact on. Increasing their incomes 2 and 3 and 4 and 5-fold by doubling your yields or more and cutting the cost of production. We can change the world here.
You're very much in your post-presidency, but inevitably people still are asking whether there's still a bit of Washington still left in you, whether there's still one more race to run, and you know I have to ask that question.
You can. If I knew the answer, I wouldn't tell you. But
you don't know?
Happily, I can be honest, I don't know. Look, I'm for whatever my wife wants to do, and so I didn't know if I had one more race left on me last time, but I thought the president was getting a raw deal, and I was glad to try to help him. But whatever happens there, I'm going to keep doing this. This is what my job is. I love this job. I love doing this foundation work.
President Clinton, I'm going to see you in Kigali.
Good.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks. Hi, folks.
Bill Clinton in Africa.